Tired of the hype about living the dream? It's time for truth. This is the place for tools, power, and real talk so you can create the life you dream and deserve. Your ultimate life. Subscribe, share, create. You have infinite power.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Your Ultimate Life, the podcast that I created for you to help you learn and to create your ultimate life, a life that I define as one of purpose, prosperity, and joy. I'm grateful today to have a guest with me, Naden, who has been here another time a couple of years ago, and I invited him back because he's about good stuff. Welcome to the show, Liam.
Hi, Kellen. Thanks for having me. Great to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you too. So when we just had a little pre-conversation, you said you're floating in a boat somewhere. So tell me about that. How'd you get there and where are you and what are you doing?
Well, yeah, I'm in the south of France at the moment. I've essentially been a nomad since 2010, 2011, actually. I've just been floating around and for the last decade, mainly on boats, sailing on boats. And so next week, actually, we're launching our next boat number 4, and we'll be sailing around the Mediterranean for the foreseeable future.
So what made you decide to live on a boat?
Well, I actually gave up a long time trying to figure out what I should be doing with my life, because I spent a long time having my goals and trying to work all this stuff out and, practicing and to being the best version of whoever I could. And I ended up pretty successful on the outside, a millionaire with my own businesses and, lots of the trappings of success. But actually what ended up happening was I lost everything, became homeless. And the really strange part about that, and this is the answer to your question, the really strange part was when I did lose everything, I didn't know why it had happened. Because literally just weeks before that happened, and it happened very, very quickly, I can literally remember to the day I was sitting in the music room of the brand new house that I just finished building, my dream house.
Where was that?
Where?
Yeah, I'm just curious where it was.
Yeah, South Island of New Zealand, my home country.
Okay,
and it was
cool.
a magnificent house. And, here I was, and I wanted a music room because I'd been a musician earlier in my life, and I'd always had this dream of having this house with a music room. So I went in on this particular day, and I looked out over the mountains, out of the incredible windows that we'd built, that it faced the mountains. And I remember thinking, this is it. I've reached my goals. This is what I had on my goals list, was to have this dream house, to have my own businesses, to be a millionaire, to have freedom to do what I want. So you know what? I should feel amazing. I've done it. And I actually felt absolutely and completely miserable beyond all belief. I was shaking with stress. I was almost in tears. And I couldn't, and the reality was, even though I had all this stuff, everything that was on my goals list pretty much was there, except for any inner fulfillment and happiness, because I still had a ton of problems. I still had stress in my life. Things weren't going well in all sorts of areas. My marriage wasn't going well. My businesses weren't really doing that well. But even when they were doing well, there were always problems to deal with. And I'd come to believe through many people over many years saying, well, that's the price of success. Stress and struggle, overcoming challenges, dealing with life. That's what it's about. And if you don't learn to deal with that, mate, to use a colloquial New Zealand term,
no, it's all good.
You're not
I
going
love
to be
it.
successful. So I really thought that was true. And I thought, but I remember at this particular point thinking, this is crazy. There's got to be more to this. Because, I didn't sign up to be an entrepreneur and really try with my life to make the best of it and reach my goals, to be unhappy, to have all these problems. And I kept thinking, it's not really my fault that I've got these problems and stress in my life, and these things keep showing up to knock me off track when I should be able to just enjoy the success that I have. It's not my fault. I'm really working as hard as I can to get my life not having problems, to deal with all of this stuff. But I got to the point on this particular day where I said, and it was a little voice, or, the voice within, or whatever we like to say, but this thought came to me, which was, maybe I'd rather give all this up, give everything I have, give it away, and start again if it means that I save my soul. That's the only thing I want to keep is my soul, because it felt like that was what was leaving. All my life force was being drained out of me. But the irony was, then I said to myself, or I said, sorry, what I should say is we have to be careful sometimes. They tell us we have to be careful of what we think. Because it literally was, as I said, just a few weeks later, everything collapsed. The house went, my businesses went, all my money, my marriage, and I ended up having to move in with my elderly mother and sleep on the sofa in the living room of her small apartment. I had people chasing me for money, ex-wives chasing me for money, debt collectors. I had absolutely nothing. And I was totally confused. And I was confused because I had two questions that kept coming up in my mind as I was trying to get to sleep at night. And the first one is what I was talking about earlier, which was, why has this happened to me? Because I hadn't just tried hard, and I hadn't just worked on my business. I'd been a student of personal development, spirituality, self-help, motivation, meditation, changing your beliefs, working on your goals, goal setting. I used to go to lots of seminars, do workshops, read books, take courses. I had a huge library of all these personal development and spiritual teachings and books. And I almost knew what was in them better than, the person who wrote them. I could repeat all of the great lines. But I thought, why has this happened to me? Because it shouldn't have. I had my goals list, and losing everything and becoming homeless was not on my goals list.
Was not on the list, right? No.
No, not there at all. So why has this happened to me? And the second question I had was, what do I do now? And here's the funny thing, both those questions, I used to think about them. Why has this happened to me? And what do I do now? And the answer to both of those questions finally came to me after quite a while being on the sofa. And it suddenly became clear that I knew the answer to both of those questions. Why had it happened to me? And what do I do now? And it was actually the same answer. And you know what the answer was? And maybe someone watching, or if you're watching or listening, what do you think the answer to the question is? Why has this happened to you? Whatever is going on in your life, why has that happened to you? And the second answer is, what do you do now? Well, the answers that came to me, or the answer to both those questions is, I have no idea. I don't know why this has happened. I don't know what to do. I have no clue. I give up because I was so exhausted and I kept trying to figure all these out, and I couldn't come up with an answer. But what I didn't realize is that is when everything changed. When I acknowledged that I didn't have the answers, I didn't know what to do, I didn't know what I wanted, I didn't know why my life was the way it was, that actually made things go in a completely different direction. And from that moment, things started to change really quite quickly. I remember I went and got a part-time job in a retail store, working in the back office, doing some administration, just for a few hours a week to get some money together because I had nothing. And a man walked, and I just walked out to get a breath of fresh air. And there was a man standing there buying something in the store. And I recognized him, and he recognized me. And I hadn't seen him for 25 years. And he looked at me and said, "Hi, Liam." And I said, "Yeah, hi, Tony," I think his name was. He said, "What are you doing? What are you doing here?" Well, of course, I was tempted to say, "I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm not doing a lot." But he said, "Hey, I don't know, but if you're not doing anything too much at the moment, there's an opportunity for a business that's come up near where I have my business. And I know your background and what you've done in business. This would be perfect for you." And I thought, well, that sounded great, but only one problem. I don't have any money. I can't set up a business. But literally things started to fall into place. And within a few months, I had this business started up and I was making good money again. And after that, more and more things kept showing up. A new relationship showed up, one that was completely different to any I'd had before. It wasn't full of all the drama and problems and stress that I'd been used to, that I thought was normal for a relationship. And then my new partner, then we set up another business and another business. And then to answer your question, how did I end up on a yacht? Then we bought a motorhome in New Zealand and we traveled around for 18 months and just lived in our motorhome and managed our businesses. Then we moved to Europe on a one-way ticket with a suitcase. And we bought a new yacht, launched that and started sailing around. And I remember this other moment, and this is the answer to how I got there, was I was in the Greek islands on the yacht, You can imagine this, anchored in a bay. If you've been to the Greek islands, you'll know how amazing it is, the color of the water. It's
Right.
absolutely
I've seen
sensational.
pictures. Hmm.
Yeah. And so I'm in this bay on my own yacht, and there's no other boats around. And I wake up in the morning and I just get up, everything's good, and I fall off the back of the boat for a swim. And remember getting out of the water and drying myself off. And it suddenly hit me with, this is it. I've reached my goals. Sounds familiar from
Yeah,
those
I was going to
years
say,
before.
you thought, I don't
Here
want
I
to
am.
think that. I'm teasing. Go ahead.
But what I thought, here I am. I'm on my own yacht in the Greek islands. But what's the difference? I've got two businesses that are running themselves for me, and I can just be anywhere where I want to be in the world. But the big difference is and I thought back to that time when I'd been in the music room, but the big difference now I realized was I had what I'd really been looking for. I had that feeling inside, and you have that feeling. This is me. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what life's all about. I am so fulfilled. I am so happy. I don't have problems and stress holding me down and making me draining the energy. This is so amazing. And then I thought the next question was, how did this happen? I used to think on my mother's sofa, how did that happen? Now I was thinking, how did this happen? Because here's the real irony of it. I thought to myself, why is it that I'd spent all of those years struggling, trying to figure stuff out, learning as much as I could, going after every opportunity, working on all the programs and to develop myself and make myself better. Why is it that I ended up with stress, struggle, problems, and frustration and total unhappiness and ended up losing everything? And now I'm living actually a life of total fulfillment. And the difference is now I'm not setting any goals. I'm not looking for opportunities. I'm not chasing after stuff. I'm not forcing things to happen. Things that had got me to that point and continue to, they just sort of show up. Where did the idea of a boat come from? I don't know. It just showed up. And so that's what I need. I said to myself, well, I need to figure out what I'm doing differently. Because I'm not, as I say, I'm not setting the goals. I'm not doing the hard work. I'm doing work, but it's not a struggle. It's not forcing things to happen and not worrying about what I need to do to make it happen. Things are just falling into place, and I take the action necessary to make them what they're supposed to be. So I thought, I've got a problem now. Here's my only problem. I need to figure out what I'm doing differently, because I didn't want this to stop. I thought, well, whatever it is, I better make sure I keep doing it. But I had
got to
no
figure
clue
out
what I was
what
doing
the
differently.
difference is, right? Because I don't want to accidentally trip
Yeah,
over
go
something
back
and
to
wreck it. Right.
I don't want to go back to that old life. I don't want to lose everything again, suddenly wake up and it's all gone. So that's what sent me on a different track to all of the stuff that I'd learned and been told about success and how you create things in your life. I thought, I really want to find out how we do get the results we do in our life. There must be, there's really two extremes, if you like. If you were to ask people, why do you think your life is the way it is? Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's good or bad, or you've got problems or everything's great, why are the people in your life and other people aren't in your life? Why are you doing what you're doing and you're not doing other things? Why do you have some things in your life? Why are you in a certain place in your life, but you're not anywhere else, and you don't have any other things? And if you ask that question, it's tempting to think there's one of two answers. One is, well, it's all based on your efforts. It's based on your actions. It's based on what you do and what your intentions are and your thoughts and how you actively manage your life. That's one answer. And the other answer at the other extreme is, of course, well, it's all just random. It all just happens by accident, or it's a fluke, or who knows. There's no reason behind it. Now, of course, it turns out that both of those have a bit of an element of truth about it, but neither of them are true. Because if your life was in your control, your conscious control, why don't you achieve all the goals that you set? Why do you have things that come along that you don't want in your life? If you were literally in full control, conscious control of everything that happens in your life. So that can't be true. And can it really be random? Can your life really be just a series of coincidences and luck and, random events? Well, that can't be true either, because that's not how the universe works. That's not how nature works. How science will tell you that energy, which is the basis of everything, it's not random. It has to be organized. There's an organization to all of life. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. So
Right.
I realized neither of those things are the answer, but there's somewhere else. And that's really the journey I went on, was to discover the answer. And that's what I really developed through my writing and teaching now.
So that's a fabulous story, and thanks for sharing that. And I'm glad you did. That's exactly what I wanted, because I think the best gift that we have to offer people is the answer to that question. How did you get here? And that's maybe not true if a person is, Mexican drug cartel leader or whatever, because the driver there is something not good for most people, but someone that that has an intention to add good to the world and do good and mean something. That's a really important question. So when you did that thinking, the polarity of it's all under my control, then why does this crap happen, versus who cares? It's all going to do whatever it does anyway. And then what did you create, or the description? Because that process, I could list 5 or 6, and maybe you could list 10 people that have answered that question in different ways and called it different stuff, to come to the act of creation that we call life. So tell us more about what your journey revealed.
Well, what I started to look at was to think about the basics, about how life really is set up. Because the thing that really struck me in my previous life, I'd been going down that track, as I say, of trying to force my life to be a certain way, of thinking, for me to be happy and for me to do what I'm supposed to be doing, I need to do this. I need to know clearly what my goals are, and I need to work towards those. In other words, I need to be in control, and I need to know what I want, if you like. So, but when you really think about that, here's an analogy. Imagine standing on the top of a 10-story building and saying to yourself, I am going to walk off this building and fly up into the air. Now, most people might think you're mad. In fact, there was a man in the 1500s who did this in Scotland, and he convinced the King of Scotland that he could fly. And he said, bring all the villagers and the townsfolk together on this particular afternoon, and I will stand on top of the castle, Stirling Castle in Scotland it was, and I will jump off the building in my new flying contraption, and I will fly. Now, and everybody gathered around. I thought this was incredible. He was going to fly to France from Scotland. And he had these wings put on his arms, made out of feathers and glue, some sort of glue. And of course, he got on the top and he flapped his wings, and he went, what happened? He went straight down. Because he was, and we laugh at this and we say, well, that's ridiculous. Didn't he know about the law of gravity? Didn't he know that it didn't matter what he thought, what he tried, what he believed, what technique he used, you can't overcome the law of gravity. That's a ridiculous idea. So how it relates to our life is there are laws of nature. There are laws of success. And just like you can't walk off a 10-story building, no matter how much you try and force it to happen through your beliefs and your goals and whatever technique you want to use and your prayer, meditation, it's never going to happen. What we need to recognize, which I'd never thought about before, is this is a natural, thriving system within nature that is designed to ensure that everything thrives. Because the purpose of life, if you were to ask any biological scientist, what's the purpose of life? How is life organized? Why are we here? He would say, they all agree, that the purpose of life is to exist, is to survive, is to be the best that it can be so that it has the greatest chance for surviving so that the species carries on. And all of nature is designed for that one primary purpose. And we're part of nature. So we, like the rest of nature, are designed biologically to be the best that we can be so that we have the greatest chance for survival. But it turns out we're the only species that doesn't do this, because if you were to look in nature, and that was the great thing about sailing and being in nature so much, is I have the chance to really see what's going on in nature. And if you look at nature, nature is built on thriving. Every living thing is designed. There is a small percentage of failure, but virtually all of nature is designed around this idea that everything is striving to be the best it can be so that it has the greatest chance for survival. And nature has this wonderful balance of thriving. Everything, go out and look at a bird or an insect or a plant and really look, and you'll notice it's just being what it is. It's not trying to be something different. It's not struggling to survive. If a bird wants food, it just finds some food. It's not a problem. So this is the way nature is designed. and it's the way we're designed. But if you'd ask most people, do you feel that you're thriving? Are you being the best that you can be? Has your life got any problems in it? Because actually problems are a sign, or problems are not natural. And from a biological perspective, and we don't have time to talk about that properly, I'll talk about it in my new book, about all the scientific proof why problems are unnatural. But anyway, if you'd ask most people, do you have problems or are you really thriving? Most people would say no.
Not only would they say no, but they would emphatically wax poetic about how no the no is.
And they'd give all the reasons why they're not thriving and all the reasons why you can't thrive or you can't be fulfilled and be your best you can be. But none of that makes any biological sense. Nothing is designed to struggle and not thrive. So there's only one answer. Whatever we're doing it the wrong way. We're doing it differently to the way nature does it. And what it turns out is we're doing it differently to the way we're actually designed to do it. We're designed to have this thriving state. And more, as I studied this and really uncovered things about this, I realized there is such a thing as a natural thriving state. We've been conditioned through all of our beliefs since the day we were born about what life is and the way life's supposed to be. And what are all those things that we've been taught? Life's a struggle. Life's difficult. Problems are natural. Problems are good. Obstacles are good. They're there to overcome. Problems make you stronger, which isn't true anyway. None of these things are true. You're just this little weak, fragile, insignificant person, and you have to struggle to survive because you're surrounded in a world full of danger where people and circumstances are out there to harm you. So we've been taught all these ideas. We haven't been taught to believe, or not just believe, but know and tap into our natural thriving mechanism. And that's why we don't see good things show up in our life all the time. We don't see problems disappearing from our life. We don't see problems not showing up in our life. We don't see ourselves thriving because we have this whole way of living that is blocking our thriving instincts, the natural way we're supposed to live.
One of the things that I think about often, in fact, we're taught practically from the cradle that we're not good enough. Grades and upbringing and all of the things that sort of conspire that say you're lacking, you're not, and you need to do this, this, and this, and then you'll be okay. The sort of I'll be happy when, or things will be all right then, or, here's the judgment of okayness, and it's over there and keeps moving and remains out of reach. So understanding that my natural state is a state of thrive. I'm a biological mechanism, and, we could talk about the energetic spirit or the intelligence or not. But if that's the natural state and the learned state is doubt and fear and striving against a hostile set of circumstances, what does a person, so someone's going to listen to this and they're going to say, oh, wow. And what should they do? Think about what practices, like I go to sleep at night, I wake up and do what? If tomorrow I say, you know what, I want to tap into that natural energy of thrive and abundance that Liam's talked about. What happens? What's the steps?
Well, there's only one step and there's only one thing to understand. And interestingly enough, this one thing is taught throughout every spiritual tradition in history. It's taught continuously throughout the Bible. And every other spiritual tradition. Science is increasingly understanding this is the only thing you need to do. And what it comes down to is understanding your biology and how you create a thriving condition. And, nature is amazing in the sense that it not only has this intention or purpose for thriving, it also has provided every living thing with the mechanisms for thriving. It hasn't just, if you talk about a God perspective, God hasn't just thrown you out into the wilderness and said, I want you to be really happy and the best you can be, but I'm not going to tell you how to do it, and I'm not going to give you any of the tools necessary that you need to do it.
Good luck. I'll come back in 20 years and see how you're doing.
Yeah.
That's not true.
So nature has provided every living thing with a mechanism to ensure that if it's used the right way, will ensure that you thrive, 100% guaranteed. And that mechanism, of course, is a brain. The brain is all it is a machine. It's a tool. It's a mechanism designed to ensure that you thrive, that you become the best that you can be. And it's designed to make sure you're physically as well as you can be, but also the other aspects of thriving, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, if you like. That's what the brain is designed to do. And it's really a biological tool, a machine that's totally predictable. It's as predictable as a motor car. We know a motor car is a machine that's only got one purpose: to get you from where you are to where you want to go easily, predictably, comfortably, enjoyably. It's going to do it if you drive it the right way, if you use it the right way, and if it's got the right fuel in, if you like.
Right.
So the only thing we need to realize, and I teach all of this through my courses, and I've got a lot of free information on my website, which is just my name, liamnaden.com, about how this all works, how you biologically work, and how your brain biologically is set up for thriving. And this isn't anything to do with the conscious mind and the subconscious mind or any sort of theoretical ideas. This is biology, the biology of the way your head, of what's in here, the different parts of your brain. I have a 4-part brain model where I explain the 4 different regions of your brain and what the purpose is and how it all works together. But really, really simply, the Bible tells us, every spiritual tradition tells us, all of science tells us, if you want to thrive, you need to use your brain the right way. And the only way to use your brain is to eliminate fear. It says in the Bible 365 times, be not afraid. Now, this isn't it's not saying, don't try not to worry so much. It's an instruction. It's a biological instruction. Because what happens is when you experience the emotion of fear, and with that, frustration, anger, bitterness, regret, all of those things are manifestations of fear. But when you literally create or feel the emotion of fear, your brain switches its state. It switches to a different part of your nervous system, and it shuts down your thriving mechanism. And I call this your thriving mechanism is your creative brain, and your struggle and survival and shutdown mechanism, which is activated with fear, is your survival brain. But what do you need if you want to thrive in your life? You need creativity. You need imagination. You need to go with those gut instincts. You need to hear the little voices in your head and follow them. You need to get inspired. You need to come up with new ideas. You need to find new solutions to problems. You need to find better ways to do things. Now, all of those things are activated by the small part of our brain right in the center, which I call your creative brain. That's your thriving state. That's your natural state. But when you feel fear, all of those things are shut down. And we probably don't have time to talk about why, but it's a biological thing, because you have this other part of you which is designed to protect you from threats and dangers. And millions of years ago, when the human was created, we needed some sort of way of protecting ourselves from the lions and the wild animals and all the threats and dangers that surrounded us. So the way we were designed to live was in this natural thriving state, being creative, being imaginative, living to our best, feeling, it's sometimes called in the flow, or being in the zone with, we're thriving. That's the way we're designed to be. But if a lion comes out from behind a rock, what our brain does is it holds that back, it switches all of that off, and it kicks in the survival instinct. So you're going to run away, or you're going to shout for help, or you're going to fight, or whatever it is you do. These are all reactions from a different part of your brain to what it perceives as a threat to your survival. And what activates that is when your brain sees something that it says is dangerous, and it activates this fear response. So what you're doing on a biological level is it's a signal from your brain to activate this fear response and fight a danger that's there. But what happens in modern life? There are no lions. We're all running around with all these things that are making us afraid and activating the wrong part of our brain. And then we sit down and we say, I'm so unhappy. What do I need to do to be happy? What do my goals need to be? What should I do next? What do I need to learn? How can I figure out how to solve my problems?
You know what occurs to me as you say that? If I am perceiving, you're right, there's not lions running around, but if I'm treating the world like it's a threat, and I've activated and I'm living in that state of fear, and then I ask all those questions, what are my goals, what are my actions, I can't even answer them, because the only thing that state does is preserve my life, and so I can't even answer those questions when I'm in the fear-activated state, it seems like.
Absolutely right. That part of your brain has no clue about what you want or what you should do. It can only do 4 things. It can only get you to run away, to fight, ask for help, or to stop and do nothing. And when you really think about it, people listening or watching, when you're in a state of fear, what are you doing? You're only doing those four things. So you might be depressed and say, oh, I can't do anything. So you're not productive and you don't do anything. Or you might be asking for help and saying, please, somebody help me. What do I need to do? Tell me what to do to get out of this situation. Or you might just be running away from it and denying it and having, taken some drugs or smoking a cigarette or drinking something to run away from the problem. Or you might be trying to fight it and say, I'm going to fight this and do whatever I can. None of those things involve your higher intelligence, because this part of your brain, that's all it doesn't know the answer to those things. So if you really want to make progress in your life, you have to get out of the wrong part of the brain. You have to stop being stuck.
So
when we're in that
ask you a
state, we
question.
say,
I know. I want all this, but you're right. We have about 10 more minutes, and I want to make sure that we sort of close the circle, and I also want to make sure people know where to find everything. So if we, and I don't think anybody would argue, I certainly wouldn't, that we live in a fear-inducing world. Threats and fear and perceived things and made-up stuff and, the upbringing and all that creates us as people who live in that fear part of the brain. And as you've described, I can't do anything there except fight, flight, freeze, or yell for help or whatever. So if I hear this and I say, okay, cool, I believe you. I want to learn, practice, whatever it is, to get out of the fear thing, because darn it, there really isn't any life threat anyway, and go to this creative side and to walk across that bridge or turn off that switch and eliminate fear and its neurotransmitters and response from my life. What do you do?
well, it's simple but not necessarily easy, because what you have to undo is a lifetime of habits, the wrong habits about how you're operating your life, how you're operating your brain. And it's a little bit like if you came to me and said, Liam, you're a nutritionist, how do I lose weight? I'd say, well, it's very simple. You just stop eating the wrong food, you eat the right food, and you do exercise. So it's dead simple, but actually doing that means undoing your whole lifetime of bad habits. So it's not necessarily easy. It's not easy at all. But here's the answer. And maybe I could say it like this. Imagine if I came to you and said, I would like you to drink this glass of liquid. And you said, well, what is it? And I said, well, it's hydrochloric acid. And you said, well, I'm not going to drink that. And so why aren't you going to drink it? And you would say, well, I know what that would do to me. That's going to harm me severely. It's going to probably even kill me. Why would I drink that? And I said to you, look, everybody else around is saying what a great drink it is. They're all intending to try it. And, all the research that's been done, and, people are getting quite good results from it. They're not dying, but they're not, but people are getting stronger. And I said, look, I don't know what planet you're on, but you don't understand. It doesn't matter what you say. I don't care who else is doing it or what anyone else is saying or what they say is right or what we should do. I'm just not going to touch it, because I know that that the minute it touches my lips, it's going to harm me. And then I'd say to you, okay, well, that didn't work. If you don't drink this, everybody in your life is going to disappear. I'm going to make sure that you lose everything you have. You're going to end up under a bridge, with no one to care for you, starving. That's what's going to happen if you don't drink it. And you're still going to say, well, look, I'm sorry. It doesn't matter what the justification is. I know what that's going to do to me. So you need to get to a point of realizing that it doesn't matter the justification for the fear that you feel, stress, worry, anxiety. It's going to put you into your sympathetic nervous system state and shut down your thriving state. And you haven't got a hope of getting unstuck in that state. So the only answer is to say, how can I remove fear from my life? Not that I'm justified in having fear, or that, everybody has things that we live in this terrible world with threats all around us, and, World War III starting and all this, you need to realize that none of that is true. That's just your perception. And you need to block that out. Nothing justifies feeling afraid. So the answer is to look at all your triggers. And this is what I help people with in my courses and coaching. What are all the things that are triggering your brain to tell you to feel fear? And most of them you're not even aware of, And there are two sorts of triggers, really. The first is external triggers. And they can be things like switching on the news. And does that make you feel bad when you switch on the news? Of course it does. Or you're in a conversation with somebody and the subject goes somewhere and you don't like it and you're feeling frustrated or angry or even fearful. These are all triggers, and there are lots of other triggers as well. And there's also internal triggers. There's thoughts that you just come up with that you don't know where they came from and they make you feel bad. So your only job in life, and again it says it in the Bible, is to figure out what the triggers are and eliminate them. And you can do that. And, some people say, well, what do you mean, Liam? Stop watching the news? Exactly. That is what I'm saying. Stop doing anything that makes you feel bad. Stop watching the news. Stop being in a conversation with somebody that makes you feel bad. Stop being in a relationship, in a job, in a career, in a business. And people say, well, that's all really well for you, Liam. You don't have any problems and you've got all these great things, but you don't know my situation. I can't just walk away from all those things. I'm not saying you can't walk away, but what I am saying is you can decide, and this choice, this decision comes from understanding. When you really understand two things, when you really understand what your brain's doing, and secondly, when you start to see the results you get when you stop switching on the fear thing, and when you start, we might call it in the Bible, trusting, having faith, believing. It's not really any of that. It's about understanding. It's knowing that you have a brain that's designed to make sure that you thrive. It's designed to make sure all the good stuff happens in your life. And like me, not knowing where it all came from. And if you really think about it, whoever's watching or listening, most of the stuff that you've got in your life is not the result, the meaningful stuff, is not the result of any goals that you set or anything intentional. Things come along. Think about when you met the person who became your husband or wife. Did you the day before sit down and say, tomorrow at 9 o'clock, I'm going to meet a person and this is their name, this is what they look like, and this is what we're going to do for the rest of our life? It's not the way it works. There is something else at play. There is this thriving energy. But you can't tap into that if you're held back by trying to control, which all comes from fear. If you knew that everything perfect was going to happen in your life, why wouldn't you just enjoy it? If you knew with certainty, you didn't have to think about anything, that you'll think the right thoughts at the right time, you'll do the right things at the right time. Just, let go and enjoy it. If you knew that's the way it worked, that is what you do. You wouldn't be thinking or worrying or, now we all fall back into the state from time to time. I'm not perfect either. But that's the way if you really understood that and you knew that and you started to see things show up in your life that were like, wow, how did that happen? I understand now. It's my creative brain that brought that to me, and because I wasn't worried about it.
So what I need to do now, I don't need anything, but what I want to do now is I want to ask you said Liam Naden, and I said Liam Naden, so I apologize, liamnaden.com, but I want to make sure people know how to find out, because, one of the books I wrote is called Walking Without Fear, and it was for this very same reason that you're describing, and I love what you're describing. Natural thrive, learning to hear and follow those voices and nudges and intuition that we have, which we can't hear when we're overcome with that negative feeling of fear. So where do people find out more and learn about what you're doing, what you've done? You said you've written a series of books about relationships. You've written another book. You're writing another book that's coming out later this year. So tell us how to find you.
Well, everything's on my website, which is, as you so eloquently put, liamnaden.com. And if people go there, there's a lot of free information. I've got podcast episodes about how the brain works, in an easy to understand sort of way, nothing too technical. I've also got a cheat sheet that's free at the moment people can download called Get Unstuck Fast. And I've broken this down into a 3-step process. People like steps. They'd say, what are the steps I need to take? Well, these 3 steps are crystallizing what I'm talking about, and they are exactly what I did without realizing to get from, heartbroken and homeless ex-millionaire and having nothing to where I am now. I've broken it down to very understand 3 steps. And when you start to understand this, you start to just apply it a little bit. You start to live life in a completely different way. You do start to experience this natural, thriving state. And really, that's what it's all about. The whole of nature is designed for that. We have just been conditioned to believe otherwise. And, it's time we took real control back of our life, not the control we think we have, which is all based on fear, and start to see the magic happen, because this is the world we live in, is a magic world. This isn't a world of tragedy and struggle and all those horrible things. It's an incredible world. We should be happier than any other people have ever been in history. We've got so much to be grateful for, but that's not our experience for most of us because we're not using this brain the right way. We're not seeing things the right way. It won't let us see the things the right way.
You know, as we wind up here, it's interesting. And a whole nother episode could be on how come we created this world that's so opposite of this state, but that's not for today. I want to thank you, Liam, for showing up, for the way you're being, for who you're being, and for talking so powerfully about the truth that we can create the life that we want. I call it purpose, prosperity, and joy, and you call it, everybody calls it in their own mind, whatever it is. But I appreciate you being here with us today and sharing this, and I want to really be grateful for what you've learned and your willingness to share.
Thanks so much, Kellen. I'm really grateful to have been here too. Thanks for having me.
You betcha. So I want to encourage all of you to listen to this again. Go to Liam's website, liamnaden.com, Liamnaden, liamnaden.com, and get the 3 steps. Like, see, because I can tell you in my own experience, eliminating fear is possible and powerful and productive. Okay? It's possible to do it. It's powerful when you do, and it makes stuff happen. And it will help you create your ultimate life.
Never hold back and you'll never ask why. Open your heart and this time around.
Right here, right now. Your opportunity for massive growth is right in front of you. Every episode gives you practical tips and practices that will change everything. If you want to know more, go to kellenflukigermedia.com. If you want more free tools, go here, yourultimatelife.ca. Subscribe. Share.
Stand with your heart in the sky and your feet on the ground.